It's up on
It's pre-order right now, so you'll
pre-order.
want to intro that again.
Yeah, I'll start over. Thanks. Hey guys, welcome to Inside Comics with George McHale. Before we get started, if you like this content, hit the subscribe button and tell a friend about it too. It'll help me continue making more videos. My guest today, I'm super excited about this, is Frank Gogol. And dude, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
You started a bit later in life then, so you're like mid-30s kind of started, or early 30s making comics?
I just turned 33 a couple weeks ago, and I started when I was, let's see if I can get the math right on this, 28 or 29. So, it's later-ish. I think that I think a lot of people who start making comics younger kind of jump the gun, and I'm kind of glad I waited because it let me get a foundation in a lot of other things. Working a day job, especially in marketing, has been incredibly helpful with comics, and if I didn't have that background, I probably would have a lot less success because it's such a huge part of making your own comics. But also, I think there's like you need to screw up enough times to really learn the lessons to get started. One of my favorite books on writing is called On Writing by Stephen King, and in that he talks a lot about all the rejections and all the kind of false starts he had throughout life. And that, kind of spoke to me a lot. Like I said, I'm glad I waited a little longer, even if I'm mad at myself for taking the time to wait, because I think being a little more mature and a little more well-rounded in terms of my skill set, it made it that much easier when the time finally did come.
Yeah. For myself, I always wanted to start earlier, but it was more of like a kind of fear of like being rejected and being unsuccessful. So it was kind of like a mental hurdle that I had to like overcome. And it wasn't until like my mid-30s until I was like kind of comfortable doing that, and just kind of putting myself out there. So I know a lot of people kind of struggle with that kind of having goals but not really thinking they're attainable, and kind of getting the mindset to like push back past that and push past fear of failure is important, I think, for kind of your own kind of self-growth and self-actualization and really your own happiness. So I would encourage people who are thinking about that, and if you're watching this, you're probably a comic book fan and you probably thought about making comic books. So you can start somewhere. It doesn't have to be putting it out into the world, but just start and see what you can do with it.
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. I went to school and did a couple of master's degrees, and it was all like part of this master plan to be a comic book writer. And the truth is, none of that really helped me get to started. The only way to get started is to just decide to. Like, I had a unique set of circumstances when I was getting started. I was at a really good job and it paid really well, great benefits. This job I was really good at, but it wasn't a job I was fulfilled by, which isn't the end of the world if you have other things in your life. But I really loved comics and I really wanted to do comics. And the sort of short version of it is I ended up taking a year off of work. My wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, and I kind of figured out a way that we could make it so I could take a year and focus on writing, take classes with Comics Experience, which is incredible. Go around travel to cons and network with people, and have the time to start building out a portfolio, and which is a really privileged position. Most people can't do that, but it is a big part of why I was able to get started and get going. But what really made that all possible is I said, I'm either going to do this or I'm not going to do this. I've talked about it for a long time. I graduated school 5 years ago, and I haven't done anything with all the education. But the second, I at least essentially said, fish or cut bait, and put myself to task, that's when I started getting words down on paper and pages in my inbox and some traction. And I remember getting my first finished 5-page short story, colors, pencils, inks, letters, not in that order, obviously. But seeing that thing I wrote fully realized, and it was I mean, I don't have children yet, but I imagine it's a much better feeling than seeing your child after it's born, for me. And like I get that feeling every time I get new pages, which is sort of my proof that this is what I want to do, because it keeps being fulfilling. Like I said, that job wasn't fulfilling. This is fulfilling every day, which is a big part of why I can get up at 5 or 6 in the morning and do it, and waste my whole weekends doing it, because it doesn't feel like a waste. It's my hobby, it's my passion, so it's easy to do it and make time for it. Which is another way to know if like this is kind of the thing. Not a lot of people want to make comics. Not everyone is built for making comics, and that's kind of some cold water, and for some people they have to kind of fight against that if they really really want it.
Yeah, I can relate to what you're saying. I love just waking up in the morning and checking my email and seeing like what new art came in, especially
I'm
with a lot
so
of
disappointed when there's no new pages.
yeah. So can you take us through your process, kind of from concept to finished scripts? Like, what does it look like?
Sure. Let me start with a disclaimer that this is probably not the way it's going to be for most people, and that even after 4.5, coming up on 5 years of doing this, like the process isn't set. It's still evolving and growing, and I'm bringing in sort of new tricks to make it easier for myself and new skills I've learned. But essentially, I'll get an idea for something I want to explore. I'm very much a character first kind of writer, and then wrapping a character story in a genre. So Dead End Kids was a 90s murder mystery about 3 kids trying to solve their friend's murder. So it's a coming of age murder mystery, whodunit kind of thing, but it really is a story about kids and childhood trauma, and kind of asking the question of, do the crappy things that happen to us when we're young, play a role in who we end up becoming when we grow up, or can we fight against, what we've been through, kind of stuff. But it's also a murder mystery, it's wrapped up in this crime genre. And for me, it always starts with those questions or ideas that I want to explore, and then the genre stuff comes later. Like Dead End Kids could have been a horror book, it could have been something in the vein of Something is Killing the Children, but it could have still explored that same question. So I'll get an idea or a character arc I want to explore, and I don't usually act on anything right away. Like I don't take notes or anything. I just kind of, if an idea kind of worms its way in my brain enough that I keep thinking about it, that's like the first sign that it's something I'm interested in pursuing. And then I kind of just let it process in the background for a while, a few months, maybe a couple of years, depending on, what idea it is. And it kind of builds itself out. Like I'll think about it a little here, a little there, and it essentially, kind of forms into a fuller idea. From there, I have sort of a worksheet I've developed for myself, kind of not quite a beat sheet, but like kind of like a building blocks of story thing that I'll fill out with, like what's the elevator pitch, kind of like the high concept, what's the character, what's their arc, what are sort of like the really clear sequences, maybe, what are the just like what's the climax of the book. If I know it, I usually know the beginning and the end by the time I get to that point. And building out the middle is always the hardest part for most writers. It's hardest for me as well. From there, I'll write out sort of 1-page, prose versions of each issue, and then I reverse engineer that into kind of a bulleted list of like pages. So if it's a 20-page issue, I'll take that, paragraph breakdown that's 1 page, and I'll turn it into 20 lines of, this happens on this page, this happens on this page. It's kind of like it's kind of like a rough outline for like what the pages of the book will be. Then I, go through, I take each bullet, paste it at the top of the page. Each page has 4 panels built in, panel 1, panel 2, panel 3, panel 4. And then I, start scripting. That up to that point, that process, I decided idea is worth pursuing, and the time I finish sort of the page by page breakdowns for each issue, that could be anywhere from like a month to 2 months. I usually kind of do it in small bits and work on a couple things at a time, and other things that are not writing, that are, comics marketing and networking, stuff like that. Once I get to the scripting phase, it goes really quick. Like I am a very fast scripter, because everything is kind of there already, and it's kind of more executing on it than figuring it out. Like for instance, I wrote Dead End Kids in like 8 days, the first draft. Just kind of hammered away on it every day, 10, 15 pages at a time. And then once I have a first draft, I call it my sort of vomit draft. They just get it out. I'm a big proponent of just getting something done, even if it's bad, just so you can, because then you have something to fix, right? Like if you don't finish it, you can't start fixing it. So I just try to get it all out in one shot. And I usually find that the vomit draft is a lot better than I think it's going to be, especially as I write more and more, and I kind of like figure out like what my writing style is and what kind of writing I do. I'm writing a book right now, and I'm going through the vomit draft to give myself notes for revision, and I ended up with a lot less notes than I thought I was going to have. So the vomit draft is getting a little more concrete as we go. But then I'll take the vomit draft and I'll put it away for a couple weeks, maybe a month, do some other stuff, work on some other books, kind of give it time to sit and let my brain kind of process some more. Then I'll take the vomit draft out. I'll read through it, make some notes for revision, like I was just talking about, and then I'll take a week or two and I'll work through the revisions depending on how extensive they are. But just try and work through half an issue or an issue a day. In the morning, just go through, make the tweaks to the dialogue. If a page isn't working or the tone isn't right, kind of really tighten it up. And honestly, at that point, like I'm usually pretty close to done. What I'll do is I'll take the second draft, which is, we'll call it like the 95% draft, and I'll send it to a few people. I've got a little circle of 5 or 6 people who have different writing styles than me, or who have sort of different writing sensibilities than me, who can offer me feedback that's not going to kind of like be an echo chamber.
I like the term vomit draft. Whenever, like if I'm doing a panel or something like that, and people will ask like, do you have any advice for someone starting? And my advice is always to just put it on paper, because you can't make it better until it's on there. And many people that have their thoughts like just bouncing around in their head for years and always think about writing that book, but never actually move forward with it. And so, yeah, just put it down.
Yeah, and I mean it's part of the process. And I like Alan Moore did not just sit down and vomit out Watchmen, as a complete finished, polished idea, as much as we all probably think he did. Maybe he did, I don't know. But I always compare writing to like working with clay. Like say you wanted to do like a sculpture, right? Like, and you start with this block of clay. It's just this cube of clay. And you get your hands wet. You start molding it into the shape of what, like a person. And like you get that structure in place, that foundation. You get the rigid structure of the whole thing in place, and that's the vomit draft. And once you have that human shape, you can start going in with the tools and a little water and like smoothing it out and adding the detail and cutting away some of the excess clay. But you can't do that from the original block. Like, I mean, you could, it'd be really, really hard. That's like trying to sit down and write the perfect script in one shot. Like it's not an efficient way to go about it. But once you put out your skeleton vomit draft, like you have something to improve. It's about making things manageable, right? Like you do things in bite-sized chunks that you can manage, and you also give yourself little milestones, little wins. Like it's how you build momentum. If you sat there and tried to write an entire graphic novel or miniseries in one sitting and get it right, like you're never going to build any momentum because you're going to be worrying about how good it is. Just get it down, then worry about making it good.
And you have another series that's just been collected into like a graphic novel. It's called No Heroine. And
that's true.
Yeah. Can you tell us what that book is about?
Sure. So after Dead End Kids, I put out a book this summer called No Heroine. It is my love letter to Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I'm a huge Buffy fan. I'm surprised we haven't talked about Buffy yet. But Buffy was really the storytelling medium show that made me fall in love with storytelling. Like I started watching Buffy way too young. I was 9 years old when the show premiered, or maybe even 8. And I watched it from day one, and I was hooked. I had like a Buffy T-shirt in 4th grade, and they made me take it off like at the school office. They're like, you can't wear that. And I always wanted to do a Buffy story. And one of the kind of hard realities of making comics and wanting to work on intellectual properties is not a lot of people get to write for most properties, right? It's not a choice you get to make for yourself. Like somebody else has to invite you to do it and approve you. And if you want to write Spider-Man, like there's a lot of people who have to say yes before you get to. And the same is true with Buffy and the Buffy comics. So I wanted to do my own version of Buffy. But I also, like I was saying earlier, like I had this idea, this kind of story I wanted to explore even before I knew it would be a Buffy book. And my life has been affected on so many occasions and so deeply by the people around me and who I care and love about dealing and struggling with addiction and recovery. And I really wanted to write a book about what it's like to be in recovery, because pop culture really covers, how people become addicts and what it's like to be an addict, but there's very little content around what it's like after, like what's that road look like. And it's a hard road now, being when you're an addict for life, whether you're sober or not. Like you don't just not be one anymore. You wake up and want to drink or drug every day, and that's a choice and a battle you fight every day. And I think that's pretty inspired stuff. And I wanted to write a book about that. But I also know from my personal experience that just because somebody wants to do the right thing and are doing the right thing now, that doesn't mean all the shitty stuff they've done in the past kind of just goes away, like the light's been switched on. So I wanted to create a book about the struggles of recovery, and while still kind of holding people accountable for the awful things they did when they were an addict. And that's where the character of Kayla, who is the star of No Heroine, came from, and kind of combine that idea with the idea of a Buffy type character. And that's where No Heroine came from. It's about a young woman named Kayla who's a recovering addict, and she's coming up on her 90th day of sobriety, and the guy who she's the friend she has that helps her kind of keep her head straight and not relapse goes missing, and she kind of goes on a suicide mission to fight a gang of drug dealing vampires to save him. And the whole thing causes her to realize that even though she's been clean, she's kind of doing it for the wrong reason. She just wants to go home, and she wants people to forget all the horrible stuff she's done, and she hasn't really earned it. And she uses people, and it's she's kind of a piece of shit. Like honestly, like she's not a great person. And this is the story of her realizing that and trying to see if she can do something about it before it's too late.
I like what you're doing. I like the themes and the heavy topics that you're diving into, but then you're wrapping it in genre, so it's accessible and fun, right? Because a book just about addiction and recovery, that might not be for everybody, but and a book with just drug dealing vampires is hollow. And you know what I mean? Like, so combining them, and I think you've got something really special with how you have deeper thoughts to your books, but with kind of the fun mixed together. I think it's a special combination that you've got there.
Yeah. No, it's when I was a kid and I started reading comics, it was kind of part of it was escapism, right? Like I didn't have a great home life. Both of my parents struggled with addiction. I grew up in like a really poor area that, there's not a lot of great stuff going on out in the streets and stuff like that. And part of how I kind of kept sane and out of trouble was hiding away reading comics. But something I very quickly realized, reading the random back issues of Superman and Spider-Man and Batman that I had before I could buy my own comics, was that, Bruce Wayne's a billionaire. Like he doesn't really know what it's like to have a problem. Superman he's perfect. He's the point of him is to be the perfect human, even though he's an alien. And they don't struggle with things like, getting laid off from work or having a problem with substance abuse or, having an abusive spouse. Like there are real world problems that I experienced that I didn't see a counterpart for in comics. And when I started making comics, I wanted to tell Batman and Spider-Man stories and really cool over the top Buffy stories, but I also wanted to kind of talk about these topics that I didn't see enough of in comics. I mean, we're at a kind of weird place in pop culture where we're finally talking about things in a big way and consistently, but there's still so much stuff that we're not talking about. Like I said, there's a real big hole in pop culture when it comes to recovery stories. We see a lot of the other two parts of addiction and becoming an addict, but we don't really see what happens in the third act. Like and it's kind of the most important one. It's the one that determines whether people live or die, you know? So like I was just interested in kind of being that kind of storyteller. Like my favorite episodes of Buffy are the ones that aren't necessarily about the monsters. There's a great episode of Buffy where it's great, where Buffy's mom dies, and she has a brain aneurysm, and and Buffy finds her, she walks in the house and finds her dead on the couch. It's one of my favorite episodes of the series, and it's because Buffy's got a problem that she can't punch. Like how do you deal with that? And there's no magic to undo it. Like all the things that like build up the series, all the kind of mythology of the series doesn't help her undo this thing, and like she just has to learn how to deal. And like that's real life to me. And so like that, when I started writing stories, like those are the kinds of stories I told myself I would write, because those are the things I love. The very first thing I ever wrote was a piece of sort of slice of life drama fiction. It was about a dad and his autistic kid, and just like what a crappy day in their life is like, how they kind of learn to live with one another. And like that was kind of like my mission statement piece. Like from there on, it's always about character and struggle and real life stuff first, and then a murder mystery, then gangs of blood-sucking vampires who sell heroin, then this bag of money plot. It's always secondary for me. It's set dressing. You're on the set of a spaghetti western, and you got the two guys getting ready to duel, and the director calls cut, right? And everyone starts breaking character and walking off set. They walk around the back, and what looked like the saloon and the bank and the bail bondsman, it's really just boards propped up on poles to look like that. It's just all there to enhance the drama, and that's what genre is to me. It's set dressing.
So you have two incredible series available to order through Previews Magazine. So if people want to check out Dead End Kids, The Suburban Job, or No Heroine, go into your local comic book store and tell them to bring those books in. They're Source Point Press books, and I think they're pretty exciting. You sent me a preview copy to review, and I thought it was fantastic. So thank you so much, Frank Gogol, for being on Inside Comics, and I hope to see you on the convention scene next year. Peace.
I hope so. I hope so too, man.